Welcome 325D and 325K grantees to the webinar on completing the Ed Grant Performance Report, the Ed 524B, for the annual performance report for continuation funding. This webinar is about the annual performance report, or APR, with a few reminders at the end of the webinar about the annual data scholar submission reporting requirements. The 524B form is used by all Ed grants and has been approved by the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Project directors must follow the directions in the Dear Colleague letter and Ed 524B instructions provided by OSEP. An email is typically sent out in January or February about the annual report. This is the grant performance cover sheet. This is usually filled out in part or in whole by another office, such as your business or grants office. For those of you who have others help fill out the form, you should make sure they are clear about how to fill out the form correctly. I'll go over several items on the cover sheet next and what needs to be entered. Item 7 on the cover sheet is the reporting period. For first-year grants, the date is the beginning of the project, your start date, through February 28th. So if this is your first APR and your project started on October 1st, you will be reporting on 5 months of project activities. For grants in years 2 through 5, it is the date from the end of the previous reporting period, such as from March 1st, 2021 through February 28th, 2022. The reporting period is typically from March 1st to February 28th. Item 8 of the cover sheet are your budget expenditures. Your budget data must be from your business or grants office, and they should be reporting expenditures through the end of the reporting period. Expenditures should be reported for both federal funds and non-federal funds or cost matching funds, if applicable. Item 9 is the indirect cost information. For the indirect cost information, you should fill out item 9A, 9B, and 9E. First, you will want to check item 9A. You will be wanting to check yes. For 9B, fill out your institution's current typical indirect cost rate, such as 42%. And the approval period for that rate. The reason you are providing the institution's typical indirect cost rate is to document it is larger than the restricted indirect cost rate that needs to be applied to your 325 training project. You should also fill out item 9E, which indicates that the restricted indirect cost rate is being applied for the project. This slide covers items 12 and 13 from the cover sheet. You should always check no for item 12A unless you are in your final reporting period. In 12B, you should provide the date for when your final performance report is due, which is 90 days after the end of your project. Item 13 is where the individual signing on behalf of the institution provides their printed and signature. This person is typically not the project director, but someone from your grants office.
For the executive summary, the executive summary should include a 1 to 2 page narrative describing project accomplishments during reporting period. Highlights of the scholar and project accomplishments and progress towards your project's objectives and goals during the period should be included. Do not include the project abstract. In the executive summary of your performance report, you should provide highlights of the project's activities during the reporting period and the extent to which the expected outcomes and performance measures were achieved. The executive summary should be different each year, and it is not an abstract of your project. Essentially, provide enough detail that anyone who reads the report understands what key activities took place during the reporting period, such as courses, field experiences, research, teaching, as well as scholars reaching key milestones in the project program. You should also summarize scholar outcomes, including competencies achieved. In the project status chart, we're going to talk about section A, where your measures and the corresponding data are reported each year. You will probably need multiple pages of section A. Each page starts with a project objective, and only measures related to that objective are put on that page. You will probably have multiple pages for each objective. For the project status chart objectives, enter one of the project objectives. On the subsequent pages, you will enter additional project objectives as submitted in your grant application. A project objective is what your project is doing to support the overall program goal. In section A, an objective is entered at the top of the page, and you enter your project measures in the status chart. For example, to recruit, support, and complete 30 scholars in an interdisciplinary program, or to ensure the scholars completing the project will be knowledgeable and skilled in evidence-based practices for children and youth with disabilities. A project objective is what your project is doing to support the overall program goal. Entering performance measures. Performance measures were established by OSEP for reporting to Congress under the Government Performance and Results Act of 1993. Project performance measures are established by grantees to meet the objectives of their individual projects. In the project status chart, for each objective, you will be reporting the PDP program and your project performance measures. As a reminder, the PDP program measures were included in the priority you were funded under, and you can ask your project officer for measures again and any APR resources related to those. There is a document developed that lists each program measure and suggestions of aligned project measures. Under each objective, you would include any program measures related to the objective. Under each objective, you put the program measure in first, immediately followed by the project measure that aligns with it. Then enter any additional project performance for the objective in the following rows along with corresponding data. There will be some additional examples later in this webinar. Here's another example from the project status chart. You would enter any additional program and project performance measures that show you are measuring progress toward meeting the objectives. So for here, you can see at the top, project objective 3, and then the corresponding performance measures with 3A, 3B, 3C, and so forth. Entering data. Enter data as either a raw number or a ratio and percentage. Enter the target number identified in the performance measure and then the actual data. Pay close attention to entering data into the correct space on the project status chart. Note the target column and actual performance data column headers. If your project does not have data for a project or performance measure, include the measure on the form, but mark 999 for data entry. Be sure to include all project and performance measures in the project status chart. Do not omit any measures from the template due to lack of data collection for that measure during the performance period. The point is to see progress in data from year to year. Describe the data provided. For example, what data collection methods were used when the data was collected and where missing incomplete data is or what might be. And this is again in explanation of the progress. Your project officer should be able to understand and interpret the numbers in the chart from your description in this section. Include what activities were undertaken to achieve the targets, if targets were not met, and what were the possible reasons. Also include what will be changed in order to meet targets. Here's an example of a progress explanation. The explanation of progress should include the qualitative data and data performance collection. In this slide, you see for 1E, the grantee is discussing each objective and corresponding qualitative or quantitative data. You will enter the explanation of progress below the tables for data entry. This section should be completed with a narrative that includes qualitative and quantitative information to explain what occurred for each objective in the session. This slide includes, again, an example of an acceptable explanation of progress. The example highlighted includes the corresponding objectives and provides description of project activities and progress that includes, again, corresponding qualitative and quantitative data points.
Section B is about the budget. This section should never be blank, and you should provide the following information. Actual expenditures for the reporting period, both federal and non-federal. Provide an explanation if you did not expend funds at the expected rate. Describe any significant changes to your budget resulting from modifications to project activities. Describe any changes to your budget that affected your ability to achieve your approved project activities. And do you expect to have any unexpected funds at the end of the current budget period? If so, you need to explain why, provide an estimate, and indicate how you plan to use the expended funds or the carryover funds in the next budget period. Describe as well any anticipated changes in your budget for the next budget period that require prior approval from the department. You should always discuss any budget changes with your project officer. So you can contact your project officer directly about budget changes and can summarize any approved changes in this section. In addition to providing the information regarding your budget, as I just went over, it is helpful to include a breakdown of expenditures for each budget category for each year of the project. This information should be provided for both federal and, if applicable, non-federal funds. This information will also be helpful for you for overall project management. Should your project be identified as having a large carryover balance, your project officer may request a breakdown of expenditures by category for each of the reporting periods in order to explain that carryover. Section C, additional information. Please refer to the instructions for the information that should go in section C. You should provide a list of current partners and any changes, and describe any changes you wish to make to your grants activities for the next budget period or personnel. For 325D grantees, You are required to include a list of scholar accomplishments, including presentations, publications, awards or grants, courses taught, and/or service to the field. This request is part of OSEP's effort to catalog scholar accomplishments. Please ask your project officer if you have any questions about what to include. Finally, include any information on unanticipated outcomes or benefits of the project. Once again, you should always discuss any change in project objectives or scope with your project officer. Submitting the Ed 524B. There are thorough instructions on submitting your APR in the continuation packet, the instructions that you received. You will submit the report through G5. And if you're submitting your final report, refer to the final performance report sections in the grant performance report instructions. They differ somewhat from annual reports. Contact your project officer for any reporting requirements during a no-cost extension period. This is a reminder, if you've not already viewed the other recorded webinars, that there are additional resources, webinars available to you on creating project objectives and performance measures for the annual performance report. There are also additional products to assist you, such as an APR example of project measures aligned with program measures, reminders for completing the cover page, which you may want to share with your business office, and a blank template for Section A for creating a draft record of your project measures. Would encourage you to submit a draft of your APR, especially if it is your first APR, to your project officer before submitting it in G5 for feedback first. As always, you can contact your project officer with any questions. Resources and information is available on the OSEP Ideals at Work's website, and they are available at the link provided on this slide. Other reporting requirements. This completes the portion of the webinar on submitting your annual performance report, your APR. However, the APR is one part of your data reporting requirements. You are also required to submit data for performance metrics regarding scholars that are used for reporting program performance measures and for tracking the service obligation fulfillment of the scholars. In the next two slides, we've summarized these requirements as a reminder about your data reporting requirements in the Personnel Development Program data collection system. The data collection system. The PDP data collection system, or PDP DCS, collects the following data. Grantees are required to have all supported scholars sign a pre-scholarship agreement and exit certification. Grantees upload completed and signed pre-scholarship agreements and exit certification, or there's a new electronic version that grantees can use as well. Grantees enter contact, demographic, and training information about scholars. Grantees also remind scholars to annually review and approve grantee information entered about training. And grantees remind scholars also to enter any employment information. Employers will verify employment information that is submitted by the scholar. A webinar is available on the PDP ed.gov website for grantees and staff who need training or need a refresher on data reporting. In addition, you can find responses to questions frequently asked by institutes of higher ed, scholars, and employers regarding program regulations and requirements pertaining to the service obligation on the website. If you have any questions or need assistance with the system, you can contact the PDP DCS Help Desk by phone or email. This concludes the webinar. Thank you, and please contact your project officer if you have any questions.